Anybody's still there? Okay. Now, how do I get this? All right. Now, I don't know if anybody's still there. Anybody still there? What are we? 10:30. I doubt it. No. So there's no one there.
Hello?
Hi. Yeah. So there doesn't seem to be anyone here now. So what do we do? Just forget about it?
Let me see here. Where is it? I'm trying to find your live stream here.
Yeah, it says one person.
No, that we can. I can share it. What I'll do. I'm just trying to find the live stream. It's public, right?
Yeah.
It's public.
Yeah.
And what was the title called? Did you just make it?
I think stream or something. Streak or something like that. I mean, I can do it anyway, even if it's not live and it goes up on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, you can just have it live right now if you would like, and then it will automatically afterward put it on YouTube.
Okay. There's no way you can alert the people who showed up. Have we have any record of who actually tried to show up?
Yeah, I'm going to find your video.
Okay.
And then I will message the people on the forums and whatnot, and I'll send them your link. So I'm just gonna have to look for your video right now.
Which video? You mean the one we're doing right now?
Correct.
Okay.
See it on mine for some reason, but
okay.
I'm quickly looking here.
All right. Okay. Bye. All right. So here we go. We had a bit of an event this morning. First of all, I was able to set up Instagram, so I started live on Instagram, and then I found that the stream on YouTube wasn't working. Now, part of it is because YouTube has changed how they do things, and so I was sent a link to get on to the event, but unbeknownst to me, I was in Safari, and it doesn't work in Safari, so we were trying all kinds of different things, and we couldn't figure out why it wouldn't go live. So now I realize I have to do it in Chrome. So I'm starting again. So I'm going to go over, even though I don't think there's anybody out there live, but this will go up after the event. And what I wanted to talk about was the importance of variety. And since, we're in this sort of streak, 90-day streak, we want to be focused for 90 days and really achieve our at least a significant improvement, whatever our level. Either we're starting in a language or we're well along, and we want to, because very often at that later stage we don't feel we're making any progress, and we want to kind of take ourselves to the next level. And one of the things that I think is very important in that regard is to vary what we're doing. However much variety you can introduce, the more variety, the better. In fact, I don't need the glasses now since we're not fighting the computer. So, for example, in my Croatian, I have focused on my mini stories, and I've listened to them 20, 30 times, which is very good, because I'm actually, for just having been at it for a little over a week, I feel quite good about my Croatian. I understand the mini stories, Serbo-Croatian. I think the stories are in Serbian. We're also getting them in Croatian. I understand it's almost the same language. But I also did get, when I was in Montreal, I picked up this Croatian, or I can't remember where I bought it, but so I am going through that as well. And you never know what leads to what. So in there was mention of a blogging site in Croatia, blog.hr. So I went there, and there's some blogs which I can import into LingQ and study. I also have this audiobook of The Bridge on the Drina, and the ebook, which I imported into LingQ, and that's more difficult. The blog articles are easier. Then I mentioned that on Twitter, and someone said, here's Croatian radio where they have audio files for download. So I downloaded a couple of audio files and I put them on my Happy Scribe automatic transcription service that I'm subscribed to. So now I have those texts that I can study. Some are more difficult, some are easier. It keeps things varied and interesting. And if you're going to stay on something where you want to work at it every day, you have to vary it, vary the content, vary the activities. Have a discussion with a tutor, just to keep things varied. If you like doing Anki, go for it. I don't, but I do review my saved links, for example. As I go through my mini stories, for those of you who are joining late here, we had problems because I was in Chrome and I should have been, or at least I was in Safari and I should have been in Chrome. Anyway, as I have read the same mini story 2, 3, 4 times, when you then go and read it again, I try to sort of save different phrases and I try to make it interesting. But inevitably, if you're going over something again and again, the brain is less and less interested. So typically what I do is I go in and I go through the flashcards, the link flashcards. If I go into a story, let's say story number 25, and I see it's got 12 saved links, then I'll go through the 12 saved links first, and then I'll read the story again. So it again introduces an element of variety. Difficult material, easy material, different books, different sources. All of these things keep it interesting for you, keep it interesting for the brain, expose you to, the same content, essentially. I even went on, Amazon and bought the ebook version of it, Teach Yourself Croatian. Just the text, no audio. Something I'm going to read. It's on my Kindle. I can read it on the plane. I don't think I'm going to bother importing it into LingQ because it's relatively easy, and at this point I know a lot of those words. But it's just another way of bringing essentially the same content in, exposing my brain to a lot of the same stuff, but in a different way and a different format. And all of that is good for the brain. The more you vary things, the better. If you try to nail, I'm going to nail 1,000 most frequent words, or I'm going to nail this, it's less and less effective every time you do that. So I just wanted to emphasize the importance of variety. And of course, I have to admit that every language I learn, I do spend a few $100s on it. It might be in the form of starter books. It might be in the form of an ebook. It might be in the form of lessons on italki or on LingQ. My subscription service, where if I download some audio files, I get them transcribed. Works better in some languages than others. It worked quite well in Turkish. It was not so good in Arabic. It's a problem because I would love to have these, Al Jazeera and France 24 podcasts properly transcribed, because I need that material now to take me beyond. I can't keep on doing the same stuff, the same easy material. You've got, I can vary some easy material in there, but I want to push myself to difficult material. So I just want to stress that, variety is the spice of life. I was on Instagram while we were struggling to get on here on YouTube. I was on Instagram and I mentioned something that I was told, I guess back in 1974 when I left the government service and I went to work for this large Canadian lumber exporting company. I had a boss and he used to have all these sort of cryptical sayings. And one of his sayings was, "It's a long road that has no curves." And we kind of all wonder, well, like, what does he actually mean? And he would say this whenever we had problems. And this was along with another saying he had, which was, because we were a lumber exporting consortium, we had member sawmills and we had our customers. And of course, the customers would complain about delivery, quality, whatever. And the mills would complain that the customers were unreasonable, or that we were unreasonable, or that we always supported the customer and we didn't support them when there was a claim, and whatever. They always complained. So we would always be kind of hit by the customer and hit by the supplier. And so he would say, this would be a great job if we didn't have customers and didn't have suppliers. Well, yeah. In other words, our job is to somehow resolve these conflicts between the customers and the suppliers. And similarly, he used to say, it's a long road that has no curves. So if you're walking along a straight road and it's just straight the whole time, it's tough to stand. It gets boring. Whereas if there are curves and it goes up and comes down and there's some variety, then you don't have that impression of it being a long road or as long a road. And the same is true in language learning. You have to keep it interesting. And, I often mention Manfred Spitzer, the German neuroscientist, who points out that the brain needs novelty. Repetition, yes, in order to get these neurons firing, but also novelty to keep it fresh, to keep it interesting. And if you vary the content, then there will be a lot of repetition necessarily of some of the same words and phrases, but in a new context, in a different context. And all of that keeps it fresh and interesting and novel for your brain. And you learn more. So you have to look at ways to vary not only the content, but the activities, talking, writing, Anki, flashcards, whatever. Read again. And so these are the ways it's going to be more effective on your streak or stream or 90-day challenge. Now, for whatever reason, I am not seeing any questions. I don't know if we have questions or I haven't turned it on or what the deal is here. So maybe we don't have any questions. I don't know. All this technology. Yeah, it is a bit of a challenge. Getting too old for it. But I don't see any questions. So I don't know if Eric is watching this, if he can tell me why we don't have any questions. Because typically we do. So, I don't know. Live chat. Participants. No. End stream. Well, I don't see any questions, so I'm just going to end it. I apologize for the just on the chance that there are some questions, but I don't see them. Let me just ask. I can go to Slack here. Just a second here. I'm just going to say I don't see any questions. Is the chat on? Let's see what he has to say. Happy to answer questions, but I don't see any questions. So maybe I can get some instructions here on how to see questions. Is the chat on? The answer is yes. Okay, that's not very helpful. Why don't I see questions? Do you see any questions? He's typing. He types slowly. Wait and see. I see them from my end as a viewer. Oh, okay. That being the case, well, send me some. I didn't bring, in the past I've had my iPad here and saw the questions there, but of course that's again in Safari. What's he saying? Okay, do you think it's possible to surpass a native speaker? No. Oh, let's be clear. Yes, it is possible for a language learner to use the language better than a native speaker. Richer vocabulary, more grammatically correct, and so forth, because there are native speakers who develop habits which are what they hear around them, but which are not, quote, to be politically correct, standard usage, but in fact are not grammatically correct. Also, if you have a non-native speaker who reads a lot, only 2 questions. Why is it taking so long to send me questions? Who reads a lot and acquires a lot of vocabulary, And also it helps too that if you have a clear mind, you're going to use languages more clearly, even not your own language. So I have definitely, I often tell the story. I had a Swiss banker came in to see me with his British sidekick, and the Swiss banker spoke like a Swiss, and he used English better than his British sidekick. Like the Swiss, with the Swiss accent, was clearer and more precise and used better vocabulary than his British sidekick. So yeah, it's easier. Okay, what do you find strangest thing in the Romanian language? So every language is strange in the sense that it's different from what we're used to. One of the things that's interesting in Romanian, which is also the case in Greek and in Serbian, although not always in Croatian, is the sort of what I'd call if you say I want to speak. Okay, so in English and in most of the other languages I've learned, at least European languages, the second verb is in the infinitive, but in Romanian they say vreau să vorbesc. So the second one is I want, I speak. And fellow namilau in Greek, they say the same thing. I want, I speak. And Jelimna, I've forgotten now. Jelimna, idem, Jelimna, what's the speak again? I've forgotten. Anyway, so that's something that seems to happen in these Balkan languages, that their form is to have them in the same person. Interesting. Other than that, strange things. No, there were sort of vestiges of cases there. I have a question about adding link by reading harder content, but reading harder content make me feel painful. So what should I do? You have to vary it. It is painful to read more difficult content. Ideally, we find some intermediate content. And so we're looking at that. What constitutes intermediate content? Blogs can be. I spoke to a French blogger and another English blogger, podcaster rather, and they put out dialogues, monologues. And whenever we're speaking naturally, like now, I am going to use more high frequency words. So that makes it easier than, say, literature. In the case of Croatian, the blog material that I imported from this one site is easier than the book by Ivo Andrić. So it's kind of, ideally, we find that intermediate content that's interesting and not too difficult. Otherwise, we kind of fight the hard stuff, and then we go back to the easy stuff, and we find it easier again. So it is quite good to go back and forth. Is there any relation between memory and language learning? Well, yeah, there's a relationship, obviously, because we remember things. But the process by which we remember is not a matter of deliberate memorization, at least how I do it. I make no effort to memorize anything. I just find that, and bear in mind that I listen to these stories, like the Croatian mini stories, 20, 30, 40 times. And each time I try to notice different things. And then I notice the same words and phrases in other content that I'm listening to, because I like to vary it. And so by this frequent exposure, certain things start to stick and certain structures start to stick. But it's not because I deliberately try to memorize them. So to that extent, yes, memory matters, but I'd say the relationship is between memory and language learning, but not memorization and language learning. And I think we all are capable of memorizing or learning words in our own language simply through enough exposure. And therefore, I think we are all capable of doing the same in another language. I started studying Chinese, and I'd like to know if I watch a lot of shows and read books that are not in LingQ a lot, would it help? I mean, obviously, the more exposure you have to comprehensible content, the better you're going to do. It doesn't make any sense to listen to things you don't understand or to read things you don't understand. But you don't have to be in LingQ. If you're reading a book, pick up a book, any book, take a book, whatever it might be. What do you know? The fall of Yugoslavia, the Third Balkan War, Misha Glenny. What do you know? Quite a coincidence. I grabbed one book. But read, expose yourself, talk, meet people. All these things are going to help. How often do you use your Chinese? Not very often. We have one couple here, friends that we know, and if we see them once a month, I would use my Chinese. That's about it. We did go on a trip with them. We visited Crete with them, so obviously we were traveling with them. So for 5-6 days, we saw them every day. But Otherwise, I don't really use my Chinese, let's see, very much. Let's see what else we got. What do you talk about with your tutor? Do you plan or write questions? Do you have a general topic each time? Okay, I have no plan with the tutor. We don't know what we're going to talk about. The good tutors get you talking. Typically, in the case of Turkish, I would talk about the Turkish dramas that we were watching on Netflix, and we would talk about how that's not necessarily representative of life in Turkey. I would talk about how I want to visit Turkey. We might talk about food. My tutor might ask me, what did you do over the weekend? What do you have for breakfast, for dinner? What sports do you like? It's really the tutor's responsibility to keep you talking. And then if I have something of interest that I want to talk about, I bring it up. And certainly don't write down any questions. We don't have a general topic, nothing. One thing I did in Persian, because I was, at such an early stage and having so much trouble reading, and I did it too in Arabic, because reading in those languages is a problem, is that we read online, because it's not obvious in Arabic and Persian just how you pronounce the words. I wouldn't do that, say, in Croatian. I don't have an online tutor for Croatian, but even in Turkish, I wouldn't do it, because Turkish is essentially pronounced the way you see it. There's some things that the E becomes an A, and some things that are a little different, but essentially, I did that, have those delivered. Like I started Persian. I started going in with the mini stories. I would read some of the mini stories, and then my tutor would ask me questions about the mini stories, because I was at such a low level that I had to at least have the mini story, something that I had been listening to, so that I would have some vocabulary. And so she would ask me questions about the mini stories. So that was to get me started, but that was only for the first few sessions, and thereafter it became general discussions. Turkish, we started into general discussions, obviously very limited at first, and then it got better. What do you think about learning language by listening and reading Harry Potter? Of course, you have to be interested, but I'm asking, is a book translated in many languages? Of course, anything that you read and listen to is good. Harry Potter is a tremendous... I have never read Harry Potter, but Harry Potter is great because it exists in so many languages, just like Le Petit Prince. And if people know the story, it makes it familiar for them. And I think that's really great. If you're familiar with the content, it's easier to learn the language, because it's well known that more than vocabulary, it's being familiar with the content that helps you understand. And I even find that listening to my mini stories, which I know in other languages, I don't have to focus. I know the meaning. So I'm now seeing the words that describe what I'm already aware of in the story. And so I already have that level of understanding, and it helps. So certainly Harry Potter, but that would be a little difficult, but it would be an excellent way. Do you think that learning with LingQ brings more breadth than depth? Depth means speaking, and breadth is only understanding written. No, this is from Abdul Majid. No, my feeling is that you have to get the language into you. Until the language is in you, you have very little you can say, and you can't understand what the other person is saying. So when we say learning with LingQ, we're talking about input-based learning. Input-based learning is preparing you for eventually being able to speak. Now, at some point, you have to speak. You can speak to a tutor at LingQ. You can speak to a tutor at italki. You can speak to your friend. It doesn't matter. But you have to build up that potential in the language. You can't just start by speaking. Now, I find now with the mini stories, I'm able to start speaking earlier. And introducing speaking once or twice a week introduces an element of variety in my learning. Because I'm trying to find the things that I've introduced to my brain, and also because with the tutor's report, I now get new content to study, and it's around vocabulary that I tried to use. So I review those. I listen to my tutor's voice, reading the words and phrases, and I have a full list of the last 3 months, 6 months, 9 months of my discussions with my tutor as a course. So the talking to the tutor is a great thing to do. I'm much keener on starting earlier than I used to be, because I found that I have increased my comprehension and my ability to produce the language through the use of the mini stories. But so no, I don't think that this point about breadth or depth, I don't agree. Any recommendations for Chinese literature? I mean, it depends entirely on what you're interested in. In my case, perhaps because when I was studying Chinese in 1968, 69, of course, there was a cultural revolution in China, and anything that came out of China was 100% propaganda and wasn't very interesting. And therefore, I found that the Chinese literature, and of course, Chinese literature prior to the 20th century, is too difficult because it's written in Wenyan, it's written in the sort of literary Chinese. So I was very interested in the literature of the 20s and the 30s in China. Lo Xiangzi, for example, Lao She or Lu Xun, or people like that. But it all depends on what you're interested in. I guess that's it. Any more? No? All right. Oh, he's typing. How many words should I read to be fluent in the language? It depends. Now, this person who's asking the question has read over 4,000 words, according to LingQ. That's not very much. Let me just have a look here. I'm going to go into my LingQ account, and let's just see here. And okay, let's go here. LingQ, and if I go to my profile, and if I look at blah, blah, blah. So if I look at Russian, and I go words of reading, and I go all time, you know what? I shouldn't look at it here. I should look at it here, because it's hard to see. It says, oh, here we are. Yeah, I mean, Russian here, all time. Words of reading, 1.3 million words of reading in Russian. And I think I'm a B2 in Russian. If I go to, let's say, Czech, 1.5 million words of reading. Now, in Russian, I've read more away from the computer. If I go to Turkish, I have read 182,000 words, and I've only been at it for 3 months. So 400,000 is not a lot. I think it has, and that, of course, that's just the way we measure it at LingQ. You may have read more elsewhere, but so 400,000 is not a lot. But to be fluent, you also have to speak. So you eventually have to speak. So it seems you're most fluent in the languages that you're able to immerse yourself in by living in the country. Of course. Now, I'm not bad in Spanish. I'm not bad in, say, Swedish. I was on television in Russian and Ukrainian, but I haven't lived in those countries. I haven't lived in a country where they speak Mandarin. I lived in Hong Kong, and in those days, they didn't speak hardly any Mandarin. So I'm quite fluent. But English, French, Japanese are my best languages, and I lived in the countries where those languages are spoken. The more you speak, and if you have good comprehension and good vocabulary, and you've done a lot of input-based activities, then obviously that makes you speak better. I'm quite confident that if I were to spend a month or two in the Czech Republic, my Czech would be very good. But I don't have, but I have a lot of potential, a lot of known words. But if I was there and meeting with people regularly and watching TV and reading and stuff, yeah, of course I would get better. So but I don't think you can go to the country in the hope that you're automatically going to become fluent just because you're there. I constantly stress the fact that there's all kinds of things you can do to build yourself up before you go to the country, so that you can benefit from it. So, like, I learned the Chinese that I learned it in Hong Kong. Essentially, nobody, other than the odd Shandong restaurant and my teachers, nobody spoke Mandarin. Now, if I were to go and live in Beijing for 6 months, my Mandarin would certainly improve. If I go and live again in Japan, my Japanese will improve. If I lived in Russia, then perhaps my Russian, my Russian would certainly improve. But there's so much you can do on your own before you go to the country. What are your takes on learning Russian and Ukrainian at the same time, or would you suggest doing Russian first? Second, how long did it take you to be fluent in Russian? Okay, so I mean, I speak Russian with mistakes. Russian took me a long time. It was my first Slavic language. Even Ukrainian took longer than, but we didn't have the mini stories. I'm just such a fan of the mini stories. Now, like Croatian I'm up to speed in no time, much faster than was the case in Ukrainian. I kind of change my mind depending on my experience. Right now, I'm going 3 months, 3 months. I would say that if I were starting from scratch, I would focus on Russian, because that's like your first Slavic language. Just don't confuse yourself with different case endings in some cases, right? Or I would stay on Russian for, I mean, the languages are quite close, 60% similar in vocabulary and very similar in grammar. And of course, they both use a Cyrillic alphabet. I would stay on Russian, and then at some point, I would go a year of Russian, and then go 3 months, 6 months of Ukrainian, and then you can go 3 months on, 3 months off between the two of them. But I would experiment. What do you think about Luca Lamporiello's translation technique? You know, Luca is a phenomenal polyglot, one of the best, and he speaks so many languages so well. So his system works for him, and I would imagine it would work for most learners. One of the things is that you have to want to do that. So I'm not motivated to do that. Okay, and I should explain. Luca Lamporiello's translation technique, as I remember it, is that he translates from the language he's learning into his own language, and then he translates from his own language back into the language he's learning. So he does a lot of translating. That's work. I like to do things that are easy. So I just start the day by listening, and then I do my reading and linking, and that's about it. The next day I do the same, and I just let the language come in, and some stuff sticks, some stuff sticks early, some stuff sticks late, and that's all I do because it's easy. But if I were more deliberate, perhaps I would do something like Luca does. I did on occasion, you can use the dictation function at LingQ you hear something, you got to type it out. I have thought that we should add to our flashcards the sort of a translation feature, so that you would say read a phrase in English, which is the translation of a phrase, say the target language, let's say is Croatian. You would save that phrase, you'd get an English phrase that you would have to make sure was accurate, and then you would go through your flashcards in the English translation of these phrases, and you would have to type the translation. So this is something I would like to introduce for those people who like to do it. I am sure it works. It's just a matter of what you are willing to do. It's good to write, for example. I'm just not disciplined enough to write much in the language. But it gets back to the theme of variety. I'm sure it's a good thing to do. Having not done it personally, I can't really vouch for it. Tell us about the history of LingQ, and how did this business idea come to you? It wasn't so much of a business idea at first. I've told the story before. It started when I was learning Cantonese. Found out about this Chinese immigrant to Canada who had all his money stolen at the airport. So we said, because we were building software for sawmills, he was an IT guy, we'll give him a job to help him out. And if he's good, he stays. If not, at least we helped him out. He had trouble communicating in English. Theoretically, he knew English, had a high score in TOEFL, but he couldn't really communicate. And so we developed something along the lines of LingQ to help him. Also, because I was aware, because I have so many books here in Spanish and German, and there were always words that I didn't know, and I looked them up and I forget them. And so I said, let's do something like this. And he eventually went back to China, but we then tried to interest the immigration department here, and immigration department and everything connected to them is just a bureaucratic mess with a lot of protecting the sort of immigrant service societies that feed off the government. So in the end, we made it into a multi-language platform. And I think we were driven more by our interest in the project rather than it as a business idea. And we just stayed with it for a long, long time. And it's been a long road. And but we are totally committed to it. It's been so much fun for me. And as a result of LingQ, in the last 12, 13 years, I've learned, well, when I wrote my book, I was at 9 languages. I'm now, with Croatian, it'll be 22. So what's that, 13 languages in 13 years? So it's been great. How do you find the time to spend with a language, especially for busy people? Well, everybody is busy, but everybody has other activities. So the advantage with language learning is that you can combine it with other activities. I can listen while doing the dishes, listen while in the car, listen while working out. And then of course, while listening, there's things I don't understand. And then I just have to find another half hour or so to read and to create links and so forth. And then I go back to listening the next day, often to the same stuff or to new stuff. So it's not hard to fit in an hour and a half a day if you're motivated. Yeah, there is time. It's a matter of how you do it. Okay, I'll just see. Is that it? That's it. Okay, we're going to call it here. I apologize for the confusion initially. Didn't know that I had to be in Chrome. I didn't even realize I was in Safari. But we eventually ended up having a discussion here. So thank you. And I'm off to Croatia tomorrow. So I won't be doing these for the next couple of weeks because I don't know what the status is over there. But I will stay on my Serbo-Croatian streak. And I hope you all do too. Bye for now.